la fiche de projet.
You have wasted my.
Okay, I think you would like to start. We still have a few people joining, but it's that time. I think we want to start now. Please, if you are not talking, can they be on mute? Can they be on mute? Sorry. Right. So welcome to today's training, basically focus on ITN campaign assessment. I think over the last few years, we've done some work on ITN campaign assessment and developing the procedures guidance that is focused on conducting or improving the quality assurance of household registration and also ITN distribution activities. These 2 days training will highly focus on the various procedures that we can use in terms of doing household registration and ITN distribution quality assessment. The first few days we focus a bit more on the general principles on doing some of this assessment and more or less focus a bit more on the use of the CLQS. Just a few administrative things. Please, there's odd interpretation. So if you can look at the screen and select the language of your choice. For the French speakers, you can be select English based on the language of your choice or the language of your preference. As I mentioned earlier, for day 1, we would focus a bit more on the CLQS principles and also how we can use various approaches to do various sampling approaches. The sessions would focus more on, first of all, a bit of an intro and overview on the whole process. We have an overview of the procedures for ITN campaign. We also discussed some approaches and terminology as far as COQS or the ITN campaign assessment is concerned. We also look a bit more on the COQS, as I mentioned, even though there are different sampling approaches for doing household quality assurance or household quality assessment. For this particular training, we would be focused a bit more on COQS. We also work on identifying various sampling frame and then clusters, or how we are going to be able to select the cluster in the lot. And lastly, we would focus also on selection of the households. A few administrative procedures again, please, if you want to ask a question, kindly use the Q&A option. So you have the Q&A option on your screen. You kindly use the Q&A option for asking questions. You can equally raise your hands, but I would suggest that you raise your hands maybe when the session has ended, just for the presentation flow to go on, so that maybe after each of the sessions, when we open for the Q&A, you can raise your hand if you want to ask questions by raising your hands. We have shared some materials on Friday, 2nd June, which has French presentations. For the purpose of, or maybe for technology challenges, we cannot project the two presentations at the same time. So we'll be using solely the English, but for the French speakers, if you want to follow the presentations, we've shared that with you. There's also a working exercise on it, so please, I encourage you to open it so that when we get there, you can follow the working exercises. Let me once again remind that if you are not talking, please kindly be on mute so we can have a very fruitful discussion. Thank you for joining this training. I think we all know ourselves, so we don't really need any introduction. I don't see any new person here. Most of us are within the TA group. So I'll hand over to Mary to kickstart the training session. Over.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert. And hello, everyone. I'm Mary Conte. I think I know most of the people on the call. Really excited to be here today with all of you. Thank you for joining us. And it's really been wonderful to be part of this team with Robert Zippo and Mac and Marcy in organizing this. We will move to, in the next slide, in this slide, you see on the left-hand side of the screen, a new AMP document that came out at the end of last year. If you haven't already seen it, we did do a brief presentation on the document Mac and I did last year, or at the start of this year. It is now available on the AMP website, so you'll see a link that's available in the first bullet. And these slides will also be available in English, so you will be able to click on the hyperlinks that are in the slides. And this document is providing procedures for assessing the quality of ITN distribution, mass distribution activities, including both household registration as well as distribution activities. And there's a package of materials that's available at that link. The first thing is the document that's available in 4 languages, in English, in French, in Spanish, and in Portuguese. Many thanks to everyone who helped translating the document, and also to our interpreters today. And this document provides both guidance and easy to use tools. Some of the tools are available in the 14 annexes to the document. Some of those annexes are available directly at the end of the document, and others are as embedded links within the document. So as you read through and it references, you'll see those in there. And among the intended users are, of course, national ITN campaign coordination committees, M&E subcommittees, as well as all of us, personnel and partners involved in household registration and ITN distribution. Sorry, I clicked too soon. And the last set of resources that are available are a set of global and country resources. This includes things like the protocols that have been already used in other countries, the WHO Global Polio Eradication Assessment manual that was one of our key resources used in developing the procedures document. So very lucky to have all of you here today. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for all of the work that you do in making sure that campaigns are the highest quality possible, and really excited to dive in today. We're very lucky to be here today with Mac Otten, who has been our lead technical advisor, both in developing the document and will be our lead trainer, technical trainer, as we move through the material, as well as Robert Apuku, who has been guiding us throughout the development of this training. Robert, it's been great working with you. Thank you for your leadership. And last but certainly not least, Zippo is also joining us. Zippo Mugangwa is joining us from Kenya. And Zippo, it's been wonderful working with you. Zippo has designed all of these wonderful slides and the Menti exercises that we will be working on. So we'll have a series of slides where we go through material. We will have breaks where Mac will walk us through questions and answers. And as Robert mentioned in developing the training, we really want this to be participatory. We all know each other, we're among friends, we're together on this. So please do feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, reach out to us, raise your hands. We'll do our best to respond as we go along, and also during the Q&A period. You can be asking questions in French and English. We have the interpretation, and we can also support with translating questions in the chat. So really invite you to participate. And then we will also have a few participatory exercises where we're all practicing the material. And these are really meant not to put anyone on the spot or make anyone uncomfortable, but really as a way for all of us to use the material to practice making sure we understand the terminology and that we're understanding the material that's being presented. So let's dive in without further ado. So we'll start with a brief overview of the first 3 steps of the procedures document. The document is organized in 10 easy to follow steps. And we'll go through this fairly quickly because this has a lot of material that all of you as TA providers are very familiar with. From the implementation side. So we'll look at some of the information in those 3 steps that are specific to assessment. And then Mac will really do the deep dive into step 4 and the technical material for designing the assessment and assessment protocols and questionnaires. So the first question is, of course, why are we here? Why are we focused on assessment? Why is this important? And I think this is where I would start to invite you to share from your experiences where assessment has been important for you, how you've used it, and if you have questions, if there are things that we've missed. We've pulled out certain things from the procedures document. There's a lot of other detail that's in the document, but really, it's always important, I think, to kind of start with the why question. Why are we all here? And as we know, and as you all dedicate your lives to ensuring happens, maintaining high coverage of ITNs for the populations in need to ensure that community level protection is so vital and so important as part of the campaign. And you also know better than any of us that during the preparations and during the campaign activities, lots of things can happen in the field. Lots of issues can come up. Sometimes things can be going well in many places, but then there are certain pockets where there are key issues. Maybe the households don't receive ITNs, or they're receiving an incorrect number of ITNs, or they're not receiving their vouchers during household registration. Things that can lead to lower than expected coverage. And despite all of your hard work and the hard work of national control programs and partners involved in the campaign, things can go awry. And these visits to the household through this rapid assessment process that we're going to talk through, and Mac will take us on a deep dive through, is really another tool that you can have in your toolbox to give you objective information, either during the activities through an in-process approach or at the end of activities through an end-process approach. And we'll look at both of those in a little bit more detail as we go throughout the day. So this brings us to the bottom line objective of assessing campaigns, is really looking at determining if the campaign has achieved the desired level of performance in a given area or given areas in order to take corrective action as needed, either during the campaign activities, which is called in-process assessment, and we'll look more specifically at that definition in upcoming slides, or after the implementation of activities through end-process assessment. And a few of the specific outputs, many more, are in the procedures document. It provides near real-time valid data to ITN campaign staff. It identifies areas where additional activities, either additional household registration or distribution or social and behavior change, may be needed because targets were missed, particularly in the in-process assessment approach. It can establish whether households have correctly received and understood campaign messages and campaign information. It can reduce the likelihood of errors or inconsistencies during household registration, which we know can reverberate into the distribution and other components of the logistics and micro logistics and planning of the training. And it provides information early in the campaign process to identify and address issues, again, particularly for this in-process approach. So we'll look in the next slide at the specific definitions of in-process and end-process, so you have it in writing in terms of what we specifically mean. But knowing that the AMP recommends that national malaria programs and campaign supporters consider doing both in-process and end-process assessment approaches, so both during campaign activities as well as shortly after activities end. And we also understand that resources may be limited to add another activity for this assessment, these assessment approaches. So in the cases where resources are limited, the M&E subcommittees may need to make some considered decisions about whether they would do either in process or end process. So it will be good as we walk through this that you understand those two approaches and how to walk programs through some of those decisions. So as promised, the terminology. So first, just making sure that we're all calling things the same thing. You know very well about single phase and double phase campaigns. So this is just to make sure that we're using the same terminology. I think sometimes we call it single stage, et cetera. But for the purposes of this training and the purposes of the procedures manual, when we're talking about a single phase campaign, we're talking about an approach where the distribution takes place at the same time during either a door-to-door visit or immediately after registration at a fixed site. And a double phase campaign is an approach which is featuring two visits. The first visit can be to the household to conduct the household registration, and a second visit may come back to the household to provide the ITNs or through a fixed site. So just a little quick recap of single phase and double phase campaigns. And then, as we've been discussing, in-process assessment is an assessment which is ongoing and conducted while your household registration and or ITN distribution activities are happening. And we'll look on the next slide a little bit more specifically about what that means in terms of the timing. An end process assessment is conducted after ITN campaign activities have been completed or after specific phases. So again, looking at the in-process assessment approach, which happens during campaign activities, looking at the timing bullet, for example, and these can be a little bit flexible depending on the particular context. But in general, for example, if you have a campaign activity, a household registration that's taking approximately 7 days, you would probably want to do your assessment during the initial 2 to 4 days, so that as you are conducting your activities, you can quickly get the feedback from this assessment approach within the first couple of days. And as Mac will reinforce, really those first 2 to 3 days, or really the first 2 days of data collection on day 2 and day 3 of the household registration or distribution can really be critical, because it allows you the time to make corrective actions. And Mac will discuss more how to analyze the data and work with the assessment teams to be able to conduct those corrective actions. And if the the campaign activity is longer, maybe a 2-week, 8 to 15 day household registration, you would want to be doing your assessment perhaps during the first 5 to 7 days of that, and not wanting to do it towards the end of those activities, simply because you might not have time then to make those corrective actions and or have an impact from the being able to early on in the household registration or distribution make those corrections that can then impact future days of the campaign. And for the end process assessment approach, we recommend that these assessment activities begin within 3 to 5 days after the last day of the household registration or ITN distribution activity. So not to wait too long after the end of activities to begin these assessment approaches, which can also be effectively used for capturing results and lessons learned that can be used to inform future planning. And in developing this document, we had a lot of input from many folks. So many thanks to Marcy for leading us through these discussions over the last couple of years, really, that we've been developing this and building on previous work of Mac, of David Gittleman, of Anna Bowen, and others as part of the AMP partnership developing the procedures. And in doing this, a precursor activity with AMP and Hannah Conker from Tropical Health was to look at several methods which could be used to assess household registration and ITN distribution. Those are listed here. And of those potential approaches, we have zeroed in on these procedures on that last bullet, which is called clustered lot quality assurance sampling. And really wanted to focus in on this, as it is one of the approaches that has been used most effectively by the global polio teams, and Mac will go into more detail on this, and it's been used by the most countries. So there's more information available on the AMP website. Hannah Conker presented on these different approaches as well. So there is more information, and please reach out if you have any questions about those. And with that, I want to again give many thanks to Mac for his technical guidance and leadership throughout the development, both of the procedures document as well as facilitation of this training. And with that, Mac, over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. And thanks for the opportunity to be here to talk to you about LQAS. I think I'll skip this slide. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I'm a former CDC and WHO epidemiologist, former head or the M&E coordinator for the WHO Geneva Global Malaria Program. So I've been doing lot quality assurance and small sample surveys for a very long time. probably 35 years. All right. So cluster lot quality assurance was kind of invented by the polio eradication group. In the 70s, 40 years ago, immunizations, EPI, were doing small sample surveys. Those small sample surveys were approximately 30 clusters and 210 households. But the polio wanted an even more efficient and a lighter method to do assessment. So they chose lot quality assurance sampling. Lot quality assurance sampling has is a little bit of a problem because you need to have a list of households to select households. And as you know, most districts don't have a list of all households in the district. So they've used this clustered method, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The number of households in the method that we're using is the sample size is 60, where compared to the old small sample survey method was 210 to 300. For malaria, actually, we need to use something closer to 300 because the for variation between some statistical concepts I'll talk about later. So let's see. So this approach has already been used in several countries as part of their ITN campaigns. For example, Benin, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Liberia, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone. This material can be found in step 4 in the procedures manual. Mary has already shown you the link on one of her first slides. So there's another link below on this slide. Now we've even gone beyond the polio eradication model and adapted it for malaria. And so we call it adjusted CLQAS. Well, why did we call it adjusted? And what did we do beyond the polio eradication model? First of all, of course, we changed the questionnaire. It's no more about polio, but our questionnaire is about ITNs, the mass campaign, the SBC related to the campaign, and in ITN use. And we use different strategies to get to the village level. If you see the polio campaign manual or the polio CLQS manual, it doesn't tell you how do you get from a sampling frame down to the village level. They just start out with the village level. So we fill in that gap there. We talk about list and area sampling. We talk about list and segmentation. We'll go into more detail about that. Also, we use more than one indicator to classify overall performance of a lot or a district. Polio and LQS in general, has only one indicator, one main indicator, and it's a bivariate indicator. It's yes or no. For polio, it's did the child under 5 receive the polio drop, mass campaign polio drop, yes or no? That's one indicator. For us, we're using 5 indicators and then a summary average indicator, which makes it 6. We'll show you that list, and we'll show you the summary table that we use to classify the districts. Also, our 5 indicators are a mixture of bivariate, which are household level indicators. For example, the percent of households that received any campaign net, and by person indicators, which is, for example, ITN use. As you know, ITN use is not by household, it's by person. So we're mixing a little bit so that we're adjusting the CLQS model to fit our situation. At the end of the at the end of the sampling, national programs can make a summary table comparing the performance of the districts or lots. And we'll talk about what a lot is. And in most countries, it will probably be the district, but it can be a sub-district, can be the province region. We'll talk about that. The final, let's see, let's go back here. Oops. The final point is that above the district level, at the province, region, and national level, you can calculate point estimates and confidence intervals. That's the classic small sample survey result. So in some ways, this adjusted model provides the advantages of a small sample LQAS classification of the districts, but it also provides point estimates and confidence intervals for higher levels. So it's you really get 2 for 1 in this adjusted model. So what is clustered LQAS, and how is that different from classic LQAS? Well, classic LQAS comes from simple random sampling. So the most basic classic LQAS is 90 households, 90 elements. But to do classic LQAS, you need a list of households for the entire district to classify that district. That's, for the most part, not practical. So the clustered LQAS you'll see here on the, I think you can see in the middle of the slide, there's 6 randomly selected clusters, and within each cluster, there's 10 households. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how to identify what is the lot level, or for example, the district level. And then within the district, how are you going to choose 6 clusters? And within the 6 clusters, how are you going to choose 10 households? Here we're going to talk a little bit about lot, some terminology. We're going to talk about lot, cluster, a primary sampling unit, and a sampling unit. The lot is kind of the basis for CLQAS. That's the administrative level, and it can be a district, a sub-district, a health area, a zone, could be a province, could be a region, or it could be a health facility catchment area. Each lot includes multiple smaller administrative units or clusters. The cluster is some administrative level below the lot. Can be communities, can be villages, can be census enumeration, can be health facility catchment areas and sub-districts with a defined geographical or administrative boundary. In our training over the next 2 days, we're going to talk primarily of using villages as the cluster or PSU level. PSU stands for primary sampling unit. It's a survey word that's the survey experts always use the word primary sampling unit. So in our instance, we're going to often use the word cluster instead of PSU. And we're going to talk mostly about villages or communities as the cluster level or PSU. Then below the cluster level is the sampling unit. The sampling unit is going to be households in a settlement, in a village, in a community. We'll talk more in details about this over the next day, the next 2 days. We also want to talk about sampling frame. So sampling frame is usually the area where you do the mass campaign. So if you do the whole country, the sampling frame is the whole country. If you just do the rural districts, then the sampling frame is just the rural districts. If you're just distributing new nets to part of the country, say maybe one region or 3 districts, then that can be the sampling frame. Plus, you don't have to have the sampling frame doesn't have to exactly be the same as the area where you do your campaign. Could be part of it. Doesn't need to be the whole thing. So the national programs would have flexibility of where they want to do. For example, let's say that the campaign distribution took place, or the household registration took place in both urban and rural areas, districts, but you only want to do the assessment in the rural areas for some reason, or the place where you distributed new nets, because you don't have the resources to do an assessment in all the districts. You can do that. So you would assign the sampling frame according to the needs of the M&E committee and then the national malaria programs. Want to talk also about 2 terms that are a little bit different from each other: simple random sampling and probability proportional to size sampling. Probability proportional to size sampling is a little bit difficult to understand, and we're going to go into great detail about that. But first, let's just give a simple overview. So simple random sampling is a probability sampling in which you select some subsets from a list using simple random sampling. You need a list from that. Let's say that there's 30 villages. You want to choose 6 from that. So you could just choose 6. The problem with simple random sampling is that it doesn't adjust for the size of the village, for example. If the village has twice the population, let's say there's 2,000 persons in one village, and there's another village with 500 folks, then if you're going to choose 6, the probability of sampling the larger village should be greater, because we want equal probability of selection for all households in the area, in the village, or in the district. That's the goal. Make sure that every household has an equal probability of being sampled. Probability proportional to size sampling is a method that gives a higher probability of selection to larger clusters or larger villages, or whatever unit you're using, sub-district or health facility catchment area. And the result of that is each household has an equal probability of selection. For that sampling stage, you don't need to do any weighting because you've used PPS. And we're going to talk about PPS a lot, and you're going to see on the next slides about PPS. Okay, so the method that Polio uses, and we've adopted their method, is to use 6 clusters and 10 households, which is a total of 60 households. You'll see a map here on the right of the Polio manual. We'll talk about this, about how to select those 6 clusters and then how to select those households to get 60 households in each lot or each district. All right, here's our summary table. And we're going to talk about the classification and decision rules. So to start off with, we've used a classification of districts into 3 levels. If the coverage of the indicators, the summary indicator is greater than or equal to 90%, then we classify that district as good. If it's between 80 and 90%, we call that uncertain, because we don't know whether it's in the good or inadequate classification. And then if it's below 80, we classify the district as inadequate. But the range of these classifications, the above 90, the 80 to 90, and the below 80, can be decided by the national program. And it can even be decided after the survey, after the survey is done, after the sampling is done. Because one of the purposes is that we wanted to have some discrimination between the higher performing lots, districts, and the lower performing ones. So let's say that the things didn't go so well for the campaign, and most of the districts are less than 80%. Well, everything will be red, or everything will be inadequate. That doesn't help decision makers. So perhaps they may want to decrease the bottom category to less than 70 instead of 80. Because as you know, for some of the indicators like ITN use, it's a little bit difficult to get 80% and above. So decision makers at the national level can decide what their break points are for the good, uncertain, and adequate. Next, I'm going to talk about decision rule. And this is a little bit difficult to understand, so bear with me a little bit. So we didn't make up this idea about decision rule. This is a standard lot quality assurance sampling method. In fact, it's based on the decision rule. That's how LQAS does classification. So for our purposes, we've adopted the polio method. And the polio has a classification like for good. Good is greater than 90%, but to be classified as good, the district has to achieve 95%. So on the last column where it says average, you'll see the first lot, and this actually is real data from Nigeria. The first lot for Nigeria, it's LGA, but in other countries it will be a district. So they'll say the first district was 99%. They really did a fantastic job across all indicators. The second was 97, 97, 95. Well, 95 is, you have to achieve 95 to get into the green category, into the good. If you're 94, 93, 92, 91, or 90, you go into the uncertain category. Because of the small sample size, we're not 100% sure if you got a 91 that you really achieved a high coverage during the campaign or the household registration. So it's a +5 above the bottom range of that category. So instead of, you don't get classified if you're 90%, you have to get 95% to be put into that range. The same thing for the orange category or the uncertain category. You have to achieve 85% to get put into that category. One advantage of that is that it reduces misclassification errors. And there's two types of misclassification errors. There's an alpha and a beta. Alpha is is the probability that you were classified in the green as good, but you really didn't achieve that. You actually, the true coverage was in the red, the inadequate category. So we want to avoid that at all costs. So that's why we have a decision rule, and that's why polio put the decision rule pretty high. I mean, they could have chosen a decision rule of plus 2% above 90. So if you got to 92, you would be accepted into the green, but polio put up at 95, and that's what we decided to go with. And I'm sure there's going to be questions on that, but that's how that works. Okay, let's see. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I think Zippo is going to take over here.
Yes, Mac.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mac. There's one question already in the Q&A, so I'll start with that one. I have a question of my own. I learn something new every day, but I'll start with a question that's in the Q&A, and that is, can the campaign registration or distribution data be used as the sampling frame? And the second bit of this question is, what is the ideal list to be used for the sampling?
Yeah, so the select the clusters. So there's the ideal list is something that's from not the campaign data. Now, in most countries, it's going to be the exact same list, right? There's probably a government list or a district list of communities or villages, and you're both using the same list. But just as a, just kind of as a philosophical point, you probably want to use the original government list or some other type of list that you think is the most complete to select the villages. For example, if in your micro plan for the household registration or the distribution, you also have a list of villages, but for some reason, let's say that a village was left off. There was a typographical error or something like that, a village was missed. Well, the reason you don't want to use that as your survey list is that you want every household to have have a chance of being selected into the survey. So when possible, use kind of an official government or whatever the most complete list of communities and villages that is available for selecting clusters. Over.
Great. Sorry, Mark, I lost control of my computer for a bit. Thanks for that response. So there's another question, and this is the 6x10 the only approach that can be used?
Yes.
And what if a program wanted to have more households included? What do
Yes.
they do? And what are the advantages or disadvantages to increasing the sample frame from 60?
Mm-hmm. So that's a really good question. So national programs can increase that to something higher. They can increase to 8x10. They can increase to 10x10. The advantage, of course, is the misclassification errors are reduced when you have higher precision. The downside, of course, is that it's more and more resources as you go from 60 households to 80 households to 100. So it's a balance. And also, as Mary pointed out in some of the opening slides, we're recommending to do the assessment twice. So having a 6x10 twice is has less resources than doing an 8x10 or a 10x10 twice. So it's mostly it's this balance between cost and complexity. And we'll discuss later, it's really important to do it twice, not just once, not just at the end. We've seen that. I mean, and we'll talk more about that. But it's important to do the end process in addition to the end process. I think I covered what you mentioned, the points you mentioned. Is that correct, Zippo?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
All right, and then just a reminder that participants, you can raise your hand or you can type in the chat to ask any questions that you have. So there's another question here, and this is, the cluster or PSU must be the next level after household, or can we use the LGA or Union Council for PSU instead of village or community?
Yes, you can pretty much use any level for the lot. So it's the lot level is first, and then the next level below that is the PSU or the cluster. So you can use it, it becomes a resource issue, right? So, you know, you could use the district as a lot level. You could use the UC, the Union Council, as the lot level, and then any administrative units below those as the cluster level. The reason we talk about community or settlement or village level is that that's probably the easiest to do, but you know, some districts, some areas won't have a really good high quality list of villages, because in some districts the number of villages is going to be 500 or 600 or even more than that. So if you don't have that, then you go to Plan B. But you don't even have, even if you do have the village list, you don't have to use that. You can, if there's reasons that you want to use a sub-district or a UC or health facility catchment area, you can use that. And we'll talk a little bit about that.
Great. Mary, there's a couple of French questions. Please support me with that.
Thank you, Zippo. I'm not seeing them. Are they coming through in the Q&A, or did I miss them?
In the Q&A.
Not in the chat. Yep.
Yeah.
Am I not seeing them in the Q&A?
I sent you the translation, Zippo, in the chat.
Oh, great, great. I haven't.
And I'm also seeing a question in English from Fikadu that came in at 52 minutes. That just came in as well. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the French one. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right, I'll ask the question by Fikadu in English as I find the ones translated by Eliza. So the question is, it's a data quality issue. So the question is, how can we address the possible recall bias or socially desirable responses that are obtained from the households?
Yeah, can you repeat that?
Great.
Oh, I
How-
see. I
yeah,
actually see it
in the
now.
chat.
How can we
Great.
address a recall bias or socially desirable? So we're talking about household level. Yeah, that's, you know, that's a questionnaire development question that's common to all surveys. And it has to do with specific indicators. I don't think we're prepared to go into all those details at this time. I mean, fortunately for this type of survey, social desirability may not come into it very much. I mean, one of the questions is, how many people do you have in your household? And there's not much, there's no recall bias and social desirability response there. The question about how many campaign nests did your household receive, there is a possibility of social desirability there. But if you get permission from the household to enter the household to look at the campaign nets, then you can reduce the potential error there by looking to see how many nests that they have. So, okay, that's all I have for that response.
And Mac, thank you so much for this. We'll give you a break next. We'll have a little exercise next, but we do have a couple of other questions. And I'm now seeing the question from Hilaire. So merci, Hilaire, for the question. I will recap the question in English for Mac, and then hopefully the translators can translate the response also for French-speaking participants. So Hilaire typed in the Q&A that, we discussed the issue of limited resources, that tough choices may need to be made between either doing the in-process or the end-process assessment approach during or after, and that we might not be able to support both depending on financing. But Hilaire raises the important point that it is quite important to do both. And is there any way to review the sample size to reduce costs, or other ways to reduce costs of this? Over.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, there is a way to reduce costs. So let's say you've got a country with 100 districts, and you did the campaign in all 100 districts, and you would have done an in-process and end-process with district as a lot level, but you don't have enough funding for that. So you could go to the level above the district, the province or the region. So let's say you have 20 provinces or 20 regions and 100 districts. So you could do that as the lot level. So you would have basically the total number of households that you would need to survey is 20 times 60 instead of 100 times 60. You can see that where this is a problem of using the district level. If a country's got 200 districts or 250, that's probably too much. So you can move the lot level to a higher level to produce, to decrease the overall sample size. It's the decreasing the sample size from 60 to 50 or lower is not recommended. The misclassification errors are just too high when you get when you start to go in that direction. But to repeat, you could reduce the number of lots, and so the overall sample size is greatly reduced. Over.
Great, thanks so much, Mac. And I think there's a question also from Godwin. I'll turn it back over to Zippo because that one is in English.
Great, thank you, Mary. So Gordon is asking, are there spatial, spatial space considerations in the selection of clusters? For example, considering a combination of samples from rural and urban segments of community?
No, not in this method. I mean, it's possible if that's a huge deal. You could do a separate lot in the urban area and a separate lot in the rural areas. You'd have to look at, but for the most part, it's not stratified by urban and rural. But you could, but then that's doubling. It's doubling the number of lots, and that then becomes a problem because of the cost and expense. Over.
Great, thank you, Mark. So there's the French questions by Hilaire, and perhaps Hilaire, I had seen your hand raised. Do you want to voice it?
And also
Oh,
just to
it's-
say that
okay, c'est bon,
that
c'est bon,
Mac
c'est
had
bon.
responded to the question put in the chat, but yeah.
C'est bon, c'est bon.
Sorry, Hilaire.
Non, je n'ai plus de questions, c'est bon.
Ok, merci beaucoup pour la question. Et en fait aussi, c'est une bonne occasion aussi pour dire que nous pouvons utiliser aussi la voix aussi que les questions tapées. So yeah, thanks to Hilaire, thanks to Godwin, Fikadu, and everyone who asked questions, and to Mac and Zippo. I see one question also from Giovanni in the chat. So we'll take that as a last question for this section, but then we encourage you to continue asking questions in the Q&A. If you can't find the Q&A, you can use the chat, and you can also use your voice and raise your hand. So many thanks. It's great to have this dynamic discussion. So we'll take the last question from Giovanni. I'll turn it back over to Zippo for facilitating that question. And then we'll move into a brief exercise, give Mac a little break, and then come back for more. Zippo, over to you for the last question of this section.
Thank you, Mary. So the question from Giovanni is, in the middle of household registration, you realize that there are serious coverage related issues. Is there an option of conducting a rapid assessment?
Yes. So the end process that we're going to talk about pretty much at length later on. Yes, you can do an assessment very quickly. And that's one advantage of this. It allows you to do sampling quickly and find out the household, look at household information to see what the issues were. For example, to see if a household wasn't registered, why they weren't registered. If they didn't get enough vouchers or the wrong number of nets assigned to a household was not written on the voucher, then you find out why it was that they got the wrong number of nets written onto their voucher. So we're going to talk about that.
Great, thanks, Mark. And Giovanni just added some contextual information to his question. So he asked that question in the context of there not being an assessment that was planned beforehand.
Can you clarify for me a little bit, Zippo?
Okay, so Giovanni's question was, in the middle of household registration, you realized that there's serious coverage related issues. And he was asking whether there's an option of conducting a rapid assessment. But he then added that, this is in the context of there not being an assessment planned beforehand. So what can you do in that instance?
Yeah, you can use the in-process method to do a rapid assessment. So it is an in-process, it is a rapid assessment. And that will be clear, I think, when we get to the slides that talk about the in-process assessment, because the whole idea is to rapidly sample some households and look to see why they didn't get the correct number of nets, or if it's a household registration, why they weren't properly registered. Either the household was totally missed, or the number of vouchers or the number of nets written onto the voucher was not correct. So that's what the in-process is about. And so if they're not doing the in-process, and then they get into the middle of a situation where they know it's not being done well, they can start on that day. They can start that day and do the next day as well, and very quickly get information about what's going on at the household level to then make corrections for either redo or continued and continue with a higher coverage. Over.
Thank you, Mark. So now we're going to move on to the participatory question, and I'm just going to share my screen in a little while here. All right. So the first thing I'll request that we do, in fact, before we share it, Mary, can we show the participants the screen to get onto
Yes.
Menti? Yeah. So I'll
We
just
need
stop
to
sharing.
Go back to the.
I think they could see it on the Menti as well.
Okay.
Okay,
couldn't
well,
see
I've
our-
got it back here now. So yeah, so
Yeah.
thanks everyone. Huge thanks to Mac as well. Hopefully he'll get a little break while we do our first participatory exercise, but thank you everyone for the active participation in the Q&A. It's really great to have this very active start and lots of very good questions. We'll take a moment now to do a brief participatory exercise. The goal here is not to make any of us feel uncomfortable. It's just to give us a chance to really kind of dive in and start using the material. And this one will be a quick review of 6 of the key terms that were shared through the terminology. So a quick and easy start. We will be using Menti. I think many of you have used, but we want to make sure everyone can access. So you can either go to menti.com and enter the code that's shown. And perhaps someone could enter that code into the chat, just so everyone has it. Or for those of you adept, you can use your phone and take, using your camera, to take a screenshot of the QR code, which should then bring you to the Menti site directly for the 6 questions. So if anyone is having an issue, please can you mention in the chat now so we can see. Yeah, thanks Robert for sharing the code. As I'm not seeing anyone who has a direct issue, I think we can start, and I will stop sharing this so that Zippo can share the Menti slides. And I do see that we have 2 questions that have come up. We'll loop back to those in the next Q&A as we go through the materials. So we'll start with the
Great.
first question. We have 12 people. Hopefully others can join as well.
Thank you, Mary. I think we have 14 now, 12 ready. So should I start it?
Yes, we can start.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
believe everyone will have up to 1 minute per question.
About 45 seconds, Mary.
45 seconds. That's great.
Yeah.
And each of these will be for you to select the response that best describes the terms that are given. So 6 terms will be given, multiple choice questions. Pick the one that best responds. Over.
Great. Thank you, Mary. So I'll get started.
Excellent.
The
So the
question
first
is up.
question is select the option that best describes the term end process assessment. There are 4 options given. Please select the best one and we'll start to see the responses coming in. Thanks, everyone. And again, if you're having issues getting into Menti, please let us know.
All right. So we all got it right. It is the assessment that is conducted after ITN campaign activities have been completed. As you can see, no one selected any other of the options. So Mary, can I move forward to the second?
Yes, please do, Zippo. We'll keep moving through. And don't worry if we don't all get the right answer. It just means we're processing the information. So next question. Great, and we now have 18. Great, max points. Now select the option that best describes the key term in process assessment from the 4 that are here. Great, and everyone has voted and everyone has also selected the correct answer that in-process assessment is an assessment conducted during household registration and or ITN distribution activities. Great job, everyone. We'll move on to the next term. Now select the option that best describes the key term lot. What is a lot? Great, thanks everyone for voting. Good, and we have a few different questions that are here. And yes, the option that best describes the lot is the administrative area, such as a district, sub-district, or health zone. And very good to see that others had a couple of other ideas as well. I think we're all processing the information. No issues there. We're just reviewing the information together. And as Marcy has kindly pointed out, we have not adequately approached the material for French. So I will do verbal translations in French. Apologies to our French participants. Also in the translation, hopefully you are seeing this. So I think we will need to do the translation verbally as we go through the next one. So we'll try and do a better job of that, and apologies for the first 3. Great. For the next question, it is to select the option that best describes the key term sampling frame. Donc, pour les participants francophones, c'est pour choisir l'option qui décrit le mieux sampling frame. Et que ça peut être d'abord soit une liste des noms des places et des lieux qui définissent les strata et les primary sampling units, ou une collection des éléments, par exemple les ménages ou les villages dans une zone définie, ou l'unité de sélection du processus d'échantillonnage, typiquement un ménage. Great, and everyone has voted, and we have quite an array of responses, with the correct response being that the sampling frame is a list of names and places that define the strata and primary sampling unit. A lot of people were thinking it was a collection of the elements. So just a reminder that we should perhaps go back and relook at sampling frame a little bit. Flagging that for Mac for something we may want to go back and look at. Excellent. Next question.
Mary, I think Menti is having a little bit of a moment here. Let me try and go back. If we have time for that, it's somehow returned an error for the previous question number 4 and 6. So let me try and go back.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with number 4.
Thanks, Zippo.
No worries. Yeah, there you go.
Excellent. So here it's to select the option that best describes the key term cluster. De sélectionner l'option qui décrit le mieux le terme cluster. Est-ce que c'est d'abord une liste des noms, lieux qui définissent les strates et les primary sampling units, les unités d'échantillonnage, une collection des éléments, par exemple les ménages, villages dans une zone prédéfinie, ou l'unité de sélection dans le processus d'échantillonnage, typiquement un ménage. Merci à tous pour la participation. Excellent. So most of us got the correct answer that a cluster is a collection of households and villages in a defined area. And a couple of other responses there as well. So definitely important that we continue to review these terms and remembering that as we move from the households, a cluster of households is essentially the cluster. And then we have
Alright.
one remaining term.
Yes, Mary. Let me skip to the 6th one.
Yeah, thanks.
This was the 5th. And now
Yay.
I will try the 6th one again.
Yay, thanks, Zippo.
Hopefully it works.
Mhm.
Oh, great.
Good. So the last one is to select the option that best describes the key term probability proportional to size. De sélectionner l'option qui décrit le mieux la probabilité égale à la taille. Est-ce que c'est une sélection aléatoire des participants d'une population, de certaines participations parmi une population? Est-ce que ça donne une plus haute probabilité aux sélections des clusters qui sont plus grandes? Ou est-ce que chaque cluster a une probabilité égale d'être choisi? Très bien. Et nous sommes partagés. I'll switch back to English. We have 9 participants who selected the correct answer, that probability proportional to size gives a higher probability to the selection of larger clusters, not that there's an equal probability. So that's the proportional to size. When you have a larger area, that area has a higher probability of being selected, so that it evens out in terms of the overall population. So a little bit of review to go back for the terms, and maybe what we can suggest as well is sharing these slides at the end of today. For people to go back and review these terms as we move forward. With that, we will turn it back over to Mac. And we've had great participation. Thanks everyone for participating in the quiz. Thanks for our wonderful Francophone participants for bearing with us as we figure out the translation of the participatory exercises. We have 2 questions, one from Lidwine and one from another participant. So we'll start with those and then turn it back over to Mac. We are running a few minutes behind our schedule, but that's because we've had such active participation. So it's all good. We've allotted quite a bit of time for presentation, so we'll catch up a little bit on timing there. Mac, are you back with us?
Yes.
Great, excellent. So we have a question from Lidwine asking if about the importance of having an additional day during the assessment to recap and review the results. when we're thinking about the total number of days
Mhm.
required for the household registration and the assessment of the registration. So I think, you know, we
Mhm.
had talked about having the first 2 to 4 days, but maybe we also
Mhm.
have another day for restitution over.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. That's a little bit of a preview of one of the slides later on in the workshop. That method of skipping a day or pausing the registration for a day is called third day delay. I believe it was invented by Madagascar, if I remember correctly. Some countries might want to do that, but some have said, well, they don't want to delay. They want to continue. You can do the in process either way. We'll talk a little bit more about that. There's some advantages to delaying, but you don't have to delay. And we'll go into great detail about that.
Great, thanks so much, Mac. And also we have a question from an anonymous participant, which is more than fine to do. Again, about the limited resources. So thinking about the monitoring between household registration and distribution, would we give priority to the household registration or would we give priority to distribution? Another great question.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really great question. I think the response from the AMP leadership, of which I'm not a party to, is that if you want to choose one, if you're going to do one in process, that you probably should do household registration, because it's intervening a little bit earlier, and also the quality of the household registration correlates pretty well with the quality of the distribution. So doing the in process, if you're only going to do two, doing the in process during the household registration, if as long, you know, if it's a double phase. If it's a single phase, then there's no issue. You do it before the single phase and then at the end of the single phase. But if you have a two phase, then, and you're going to do two and not three surveys, then the first one would be the in process for the household registration, and then an in process after the distribution. Over.
Great, thanks so much, Mac, and thanks to everyone for the questions. We're going to let Mac continue. He has about 7 or 8 slides, and then we'll take a short break. Mac, as noted, we are running about 20 minutes behind, so just as an FYI, there's no problem because we're having such active participation, and that's exactly what we want, and we've built in extra time. So just as a quick time check, over to you, Mac, for the next few slides, and then we will take a brief break. Over. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Okay, so this is we're going to kind of go through the steps to do the CLQAS. The first is the sampling frame. This shows a picture of Mali, and it looks like they did the distribution or the household registration in the southern part of the country. So that would be the sampling frame. Now, if you don't want it to be, if the national program doesn't want to include all provinces or regions in the sampling frame, they can do that. I don't know exactly what the reason would be, but you know, certainly something could come up. See that. Step number 2, decide on the level of classification. We've kind of already, you have to decide on what the lot level is going to be. At what level do you want to classify? Do you want to classify sub-districts, districts, or regions? And that has to do with cost, right? And complexity. You know, that's a national decision. Countries usually use district or sub-district, but it could be the province or region level. We discussed that already. All comes down to cost and complexity. Okay, so we also talked about the results. What type of results do you get from doing the CLQAS? Well, you get two types of results, and you can see that at the bottom. You could get at the lot level, which would be the district, or whatever lot level you decide, would be the classification. At the lot level, you get the classification. Above the lot level, you get classic point estimates and confidence intervals. So performance classification at the lot level. Both LQAS and the clustered LQAS uses performance classification at the lot level, such as the district. That's number one. You'll see in the middle bar there. The classification can be 2-level or 3-level. We've adopted the Polio 3-level classification. The good, uncertain, and inadequate. And the CLQS requires a minimum of 60 households, 6 clusters, and 10 households. Okay. Now the second blue bar, second row blue bar, is new information, and that's important information. So let's say the lot is the district level. So you've got 60 households in every district. Well, at what level can you group the lots to then get a confidence interval that's less than plus or minus 10%? If you get a confidence interval greater than 10%, it's not so good for management purposes. You can imagine plus or minus 15%. The width of the entire confidence interval is 30%. So that's not so useful. But you get below 10 plus or minus 10%, then that becomes a little bit more useful. Well, how many households and how many clusters do you need to get a confidence interval of less than plus or minus 10%? And that is between 200 and 300 households and between 20 and 30 clusters. So if you combine the data from 4 districts, so 4 times 60 is 240 households, and 4 times 6 is 24 clusters. So it fits within those 2 ranges. So you can group together any number above 4. You could group 4, 5, 6, 10, whatever you need. And of course, as you get more and more households and more clusters, that confidence interval will shrink down from plus or minus 8 to plus or minus 4, and even narrower than that. So you can see that the third blue bar or third blue row says at least 4 lots are required to calculate a confidence interval. Fewer than 4 lots are insufficient. Confidence interval is going to probably be too wide to do that. And the adjusted LQS provides both the classification and the confidence interval. Okay. Selection of clusters and PSUs. So so this is it's done after the sampling frame and selection of the level of classification, which is lot level. In each lot, we'll select 6 clusters and 10 households. This type of sampling is often called 6x10 sampling. 6 clusters by 10 is the minimum. If the lot level is the district, we will divide the district and select 6 clusters as the first step. If the lot level is the sub-district, we would divide the sub-district and select 6 clusters as the first step. All right, so we need to choose 6 PSUs first within the lot. And we're going to use this method called probability proportional to estimated size. And not only do you need the name, but you need the population, because you need the population for the size. And in many instances, we're going to use the village. So you need to have a list of the village or settlements and the population for each settlement or village or community. Oops. Let's see. So this is a break or pause, is that correct?
Yes, thank you so much, Mac, and thanks to everyone. Mac, before we depart, we have 2 quick questions. One from Fikadu in the chat, which came in at 20 minutes past the hour, saying that Fikadu would really like to hear more about the challenges and mitigations that TA providers and others face, especially with regard to distances, long distances between households. So it may be a cluster in a rural area, but there still may be these operational and logistical challenges. And from your experience, how are those managed, and especially during campaign and assessment practices and following the training?
Okay, so this, so basically in a district, our main method is to choose 6 villages. Some of them may be difficult to reach, but that's part of sampling. You don't want to leave out those villages that have been selected that are hard to reach. That's not really that's not a good survey methodology. Once you get to the village, again, this is the same issue. You want to make sure that all the households are included in that crude map, and we'll show you a little bit more later. You need to make a crude map of the village and divide those into 4 sections and get down to a final segment. So if the village is really spread out, you're going to have to plan for that. There's no shortcut. You can't skip households. You can't skip clusters. That just provides an error. Now, you know, if a place is insecure, it should be excluded from the sampling frame. Let's say there's some sub-district where it's too dangerous. And of course, the first priority is the safety of the survey team. Usually there's 2 persons for each cluster each day. So that should be excluded from the sampling frame. There's also an opportunity to exclude from the sampling frame, obviously, during the operations. If you didn't know that there was a village that was insecure and you went to there and it's just totally insecure, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't talk to anybody, you can't mediate, so on and so forth. You could skip them but I mean, that also introduces bias, right? Anytime you exclude any area from a sampling frame, there's potential bias there. But safety is number 1. So but if there's not a safety issue, if there's just a distance issue, that has to be taken into account during the management phase. There's no shortcut. You can't skip villages. You can't skip villages in household due to a distance. Over.
Excellent. Thanks, Mac. And one other question from Raymond Caboret. Thank you, Raymond. He is asking, I think this is potentially a question that has been asked previously, that if during the assessment of household registration, or that the ideal is to do both an evaluation of the household registration as well as at the end of distribution or during distribution. But if you can only do one evaluation, is there one that is the most appropriate, the most relevant to be done?
Okay. I do not have an opinion on that. I think it requires decision at the local level. There's big advantages to both. The problem with the end process is that end process gives you great data. You know, you can you be able to classify based on the household registration. You can ask about that, about the SBC, about ITN use, but you can't do much about it if you find it at that time. If there's big problems or an area with big problems, because there's nets. You know, with polio, they could go in and they could do mop up, but as everybody on this call knows, you can't. It's hard to do mop up with nets. So that's the advantage and the disadvantage of doing the end process. For in process, the advantage is, especially if you do in process doing household registration, is you can intervene early. So you can, you know, you should be able to find many of the places or many of the practices that are not going well and make the correction so that the rest of 80 to 90% of the registration happens with higher quality and higher coverage. One disadvantage of doing household registration in process is that you don't get any information about ITN use. So if you only have funds to do one 6x10 survey, then the national program is going to have, I don't know, Marcy or Robert or anybody else has some different feelings on that. Over.
Great, thanks so much, Mac. And I think if Marcy or Robert do, we will let them chime in after the break and or in the chat. So Marcy and Robert, let us know. In the meantime, we do have another question from Lidween, but with Lidween's permission, we will take a short break now. We'll take a slightly shorter break of about 5 minutes. So if everyone could come back at around 42 minutes after the hour, before 45 minutes after, we will restart then. Thanks so much to everyone and see you soon. Excellent. I think we will recommence if that works for Mac. Mac, were you able
I'm-
to? take us?
I'm around. Yep.
Okay, great. Bless you. Okay. Yeah, I think we'll dive back in the interests of time. And yeah, thanks so much, Mac, for leading us through the next slides. We do have a question from Lidwine that came in. Thanks, merci, Lidwine. That if we have 6 clusters of 10 households, 6 of 10 households per cluster. So each lot would have 600 households. How do you calculate 200 to 300 households?
So
yeah.
each lot has 60 households, not 600. So it's 6 clusters
Yeah.
by 10, 6 by 10, 60.
60. Okay.
So to get to 2 to 300, you have to combine at least 4 lots.
At least 4 to 500, 4 to 5. Okay.
Yep.
And is the translation back online, or should I translate that? Lidwine, merci pour la question. Donc, ce que Mac a expliqué, c'est que si vous avez 6 grappes fois 10 ménages, il y a 60 ménages fois 4 ou 5. Donc, c'est avec 4 que vous aurez les 240 ménages et puis jusqu'à 300. And because the translation is on, thanks, Robert. We will let the professionals do that. Excellent. Great. Back over to you, Mac, to talk through CLQAS implementation. And then we will have another few minutes for Q&A and discussion and participatory exercise after this. Mac, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Okay. So this slide has some points about the PPS method, probability proportional to size method for selecting clusters or units, but mostly in our situation, it's going to be clusters, PSUs. It's based on, again, it's based on the population. You must have a full list. If the cluster level is going to be the village or settlement level, then you need a full list of those. Using PPS avoids the need for weighting. In contrast, if you have a list of 30 villages or 300 villages and you randomly do simple random sampling, then you must do weighting to get a proper to do the proper analysis. And weighting can be a little bit difficult. PPS is a little bit more difficult than simple random sampling. It's probably not something you want the field workers to be doing in the field. So they should be done before you start the assessment. And to eliminate bias or reduce the bias, you probably should do them at a higher level. For example, don't leave the district level to choose the 6 settlements or villages as the PSUs. There's potential bias there. Kind of lose control of the selection process. So maybe the province or the region or the national level would get the list from the district, or maybe they have that list already and they do the selection and not the district. Yeah, okay. And the cluster selection spreadsheet needs to be collected and sent to the higher level to use during the analysis. And that's a topic that's a little bit too complicated to discuss, but the ideal thing is to take that spreadsheet that was used, and we're going to show you the spreadsheet, the PPS spreadsheet. And that needs to be sent to the higher level for the national data analysts to have for their analysis. As mentioned several times already, if the district or sub-district is the lot level, then we can use the list of villages or settlements as the cluster level. And that's the main level. Just for simplicity purposes, that's what we're going to talk mostly about. However, there are options. If the district is the lot level, then you can use a list of sub-districts. If the district or sub-district is the lot level, you can use a list of enumeration areas, or you can use a list of health facility catchment areas. That's up to the national program, if they want to use options. For example, in Nigeria, they used sub-districts or sub-LGAs that were actually present on Google Maps. And they did random selection of the clusters using Google Maps. So as innovation comes on board, national programs can decide what they want to do.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so this is we're going to talk about 6 points here. They're kind of 6 steps for selecting and how to do PPS. We're going to use villages, a village list, and villages as the cluster level. So the first thing you need to do is you need to list the communities with their population in a spreadsheet. And then you need to use the spreadsheet program to calculate the cumulative population, the total population of all the communities on that sheet. Then we're going to show you in just a few slides, you record the number of clusters. Are you going to use 6? Kind of recommended that we're talking about today, or you're going to use 8 or 10 clusters. That's an option by the national programs. Then you're going to calculate an interval. And the interval is, you have the total population. Let's say it's an example of 30 villages. You've got 26,712 as the total population or cumulative population of those 30 villages. And you divide that by 6. So the interval is 4,542. That's in point 3 on the slide. You see that number, 4,542. Next, we're going to choose a random starting point for the first cluster. We're going to use simple random sampling. You can use a random number generator on your app on your phone to choose a random number between 1 and the interval number. And the interval number in this case is 4,000. Actually, we switched it there. It's 4,542 instead of 4,452. So the number that we selected at random was 879, and this number can be any number, but we're just doing an example, 879. So the first cluster is going to be where the 879 hits on the list of the villages. It's usually between, it's going to be the first village or the second village or the third village on your list. We're going to show you an example on the next slide. And then you choose the remaining cluster. So you've got the first cluster already. It's at 879. Then you add the interval to 879. And that's going to be the second cluster. And then you're going to add, we keep switching back between the 4,452 to the previous number to keep on getting cluster 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're going to show you that next. All right, this is kind of the step one where we've got an example here. We've got 30 settlements. We've got the population, or you can use number of households or total population. And there's 26,712. So it's a size. And then the third column, you can see it's a cumulative population. So you see 555. Okay, that's the cumulative population for the first settlement. But for the second settlement, the cumulative population is 550 plus the 1435, which is 1,985. This is all done by spreadsheet. It's not done by hand. And then we're going to record the number of clusters. And in this example, we're going to use 6. And then we're going to find the interval. So we divide the sum, 26,712 divided by 6, and we get 4,452. And then we're going to select the random starting point. So the simple random sampling number we chose between 1 and 4,452 is 879. And if you do it a second time, you'll get a different random number. So where does the 879 hit on your list in the cumulative population column? Well, it hits in the second settlement, not in the first, because the first total, the cumulative population is 550. So obviously 879 is not embedded in that within 550, but it is between 550 and the cumulative population of the second one, the second settlement, which is 1,985. So I mentioned 2 slides ago that we keep on adding the 4542 to the random starting point. And we get, for the second cluster, that number is 5331. Then the third cluster is 9,783. Then on and on to the sixth cluster is 23,139. So where do each of those numbers hit on the list? Well, you can see cluster number 2. The number 5331 hits on the 7th settlement in the list, bottom, because it's between 5,280 and 5,717. And then for cluster 3, where does 9,783 hit? And it hits in Abu Ghari. Then the same thing with cluster 4, cluster 5, and cluster 6. So now we've got now we know out of the 30 villages, the 30 settlements, we've selected 6 of them using PPS. Every household in the whole, the 26,712 in that whole area, they had an equal probability of selection to be included into this list. Okay, so if a district has a lot, is the lot level and has a clear, accurate list of villages, and the boundaries of the villages are clear, then it's easiest to use the PPS list method to select the clusters. If the district is lot level and does not have a clear list of villages, then you would need to use a different level to select the clusters, like a sub-district, a health facility, catchment area, or enumeration area. Okay, so I think we've come to the Q&A and discussion.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark. I'm not seeing any question in the open in the Q&A, but kindly feel free to raise your hand and ask any questions at this stage. Thank you.
Great, and I think also in the interest of time, we very much welcome questions. So anyone, you can please raise your hand if you have questions. We can take a few minutes now. If not, maybe we'll wait 15 seconds or so. And if no questions or hands are raised, we will continue to exercise 2. So Mac, just for queuing up worksheet 2 and the next steps for that. I am seeing one hand. How do I see? I don't know how to see who's raised their hand, but I see a little hand at the bottom.
Mary, it's me, it's Miko.
Oh, thanks, Miko. Go ahead.
No worries. Okay, so I started typing my question, but it was taking ages just to write it. So maybe it's better for me just to ask. So Mac, just a quick question. I was just wondering, so if a cluster has a lot of households, so if you're, within your sampling frame, you've got large populations, and you're only selecting 10 households in each cluster, but if there's a lot of households within each cluster, would you do another kind of PPS within that cluster just to get it down a bit more so that each household then really has more of a chance of has an equal chance of being selected? Or would you just say, no, that's fine, even if you've got a cluster of, I don't know, 500 households, you say no, you selected 10, and that's what you're going to do? Over.
Okay, thank you, Miko. That's kind of a preview of the next steps in the next slides.
Okay, that's fine. Then I'll wait. No worries.
We're gonna if the village or the settlement has 2,000 households, we're gonna talk about how to find a final segment with approximately 20 households.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Miko, for the question. And we have also one question in the Q&A from Godwin. So back over to you, Zippo.
Great. Thank you very much, Mary. So the question from Godwin is, in the example provided, it appears the villages are in alphabetical order. Is this standard practice?
I think you can pretty much have any order you want. Some survey experts say you should sort them by the population. It's kind of a stratification. I don't think that that's important, and certainly it's not important to sort by alphabetic. The alphabet of the from the name. So that is not important. I think you can put them into any order you want.
Excellent, great. Thanks, folks, for the questions. Please continue to come with questions. We will move into the exercise in the interests of time and can loop back to questions as we move forward. In fact, you may have questions during the exercise. This will be exercise 2. We for this exercise, you were sent an Excel worksheet 2 And we will also be providing a link in the chat box that Zippo will post in the chat for everyone. Thanks, Zippo. And Mac will walk us through the exercise, but we do want to give everyone a moment to open it. The link was just shared by Zippo. Many thanks to her for having that handy. Is anyone not able to find the link? Please let us know. And we'll just pause for a brief moment and then let Mac take things forward for the exercise. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mac. Back over to you.
Okay. So your Excel should look like this. Actually, the rows at the top look like what's on the right, and below what's on the right is the step one list of settlements, and it's a larger list than 30. As most of you know, the list for a district is going to be hundreds. So this is a little bit more appropriate list. I think it's got 250 some settlements. So what you want to do is you want to start with step one, which is basically the list that was done for you. So go to step two and put in 6 into the yellow box. And then step 3 should already have the population. If it doesn't have the total population, then look at the bottom of the step 1 list and type in the total population. Then in the yellow box before that, where it says interval, divide the cell above that, the total population, by 6, and that will give you the interval. Okay. Okay. So after you get the interval, then go to step 4. And you should see a random starting point number there. If you don't, then just you randomly choose any number you want to put in there. So it can be for this exercise, it could be anything between 1 and the interval. So you transfer the number from the random starting point into the first cell in step 6, which is cluster 1, the starting point. Then to get cluster 2, you add the starting point plus the interval. To get cluster 3 number, you add the interval again to the number just above it. And the same thing with cluster 4, 5, and 6. You keep adding the interval to the number above it to get a number for cluster 4, 5, and 6. Okay. And then on the left side of the screen, you'll see the step 1 list. And you identify the settlement where the numbers from step 6 hit in the cumulative population column, which is the 3rd column in that list. That's the cumulative population. Let me see what the next slide is here. Okay. Okay. So that's the exercise. How, Zippo, or Mary, where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, I think it might be useful to just hear from participants. One, have we resolved the logistics issues with the Excel file? Are you able to type in? And do folks have questions about the exercise? And how to fill things in? It might be useful that we hear back from participants as to how it's going, and the information that that participants are getting. Do we have maybe one or two volunteers to just take over the mic and share with us where you're at, and questions on getting started or next steps? Over. I see a hand up. Please go ahead.
Oui, oui.
Hilaire, merci Hilaire.
Le lien ne nous autorise pas à éditer.
Oui, yeah, et nos excuses pour le lien. Quand vous avez, quand vous voyez le fichier électronique Excel sur le lien, est-ce que c'est possible de télécharger le fichier
OK, OK,
sur votre laptop?
OK.
Yep. Okay. Merci, Hilaire. Merci. So what Hilaire was asking is that there is a technical issue in terms of downloading the worksheet. So we'll like to give everyone just a moment. If you can download the Excel file, and if you're able to type. For those who have been able to start typing, are you stuck at a certain point? Would you like Mac to go back through any of the steps, and we can go again step by step? This is a more complicated exercise than our first one, so we do want to give you the time to be able to do that. So another volunteer to sort of share where you are in the process and the numbers you're getting or challenges you're having. Over. If not, I may call on someone in the group. Could we have Giovanni? Are you able to sort of let us know where you are, and are you having questions or issues or things that we should review? I think if you're having them, other people are likely having them as well. So we just want to give time to walk through the steps.
Hi, Mary. Ketty has come on and said that it would be good to go back through step by step.
Great. Okay. I think that's great. Thanks, Ketty. Mac, is that all right? I think now that most folks have hopefully been able to download, would you mind walking through the steps one more time?
Okay, I can do that. Probably in the future, we probably should have the Excel showing and walk through that. But so step one on the right side, you'll see.
Sorry, Mac, would you like us
Oui.
to would you like me to bring up the Excel?
Yes, that'd be
through it?
great. Yeah.
Okay, so let me do that just one moment.
Okay.
Yeah, and let me go to. Okay, now I haven't downloaded this, so I won't be able to enter, but I should be able to share my screen. One moment. Okay. Okay, are folks able to see?
Hmm.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, we can do this. Yeah, it would be better if we could
You want me to
enter
download
data.
it?
Yeah, probably.
Let me download it then. No, this is
Okay.
good because we're seeing what everyone is going through. So we'll do this and we will. I'll just save it to my desktop. Okay. I'm saving it there. And hopefully everyone can see. Okay. All right, over to you, Mac, and
Okay,
share the link with the folks who have asked for a new link.
okay. So scroll down to the bottom of the list. Okay, so you can see we have a total in two places. The last row in column D is the cumulative population. So you can see that's the same thing where we actually did a sum from column C. So Mary, why don't you copy that number 131,170? Okay, now go up. Okay, so you see cell C9. Copy or paste that into there. Looks like we need to, yeah. Okay. Okay. Now go up to so step number 2, number of clusters is 6. Put 6 into the C6. Yeah. Okay. Now go to C10. We're going to calculate the interval. So do the equal sign. Yeah, the 131 divided by, and then put a divided by sign so that you divide one. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's the interval. Okay, now let's go to and let's just choose 11,624 as the interval. Now, Excel actually has a command for choosing a random number, but I don't have that memorized. So you could use a random number generator on your phone. You could use a table of random numbers, whatever. You could use a currency note to get this number. They're all equally fine. So we've got that. So go to the last column, I, and do the copy of the 11,000, just to bring that over. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Okay. So go to the cell underneath that, cluster 2, and do an addition of the above cell, which is 11,000. Yeah, you have to do the equal, and then plus, and you go back to the interval, which is 21,862. Yep. Perfect. Okay, and then in cluster 3, yeah, you can actually copy that formula all the way down. You don't have to re-enter it. I think you can just copy it down. I guess not. Oh, that's right. It's the reason you can't copy it is we didn't fix the position of the interval C10. If you would fix that location, then you can copy down the formula, but we did. So this is good. Okay. So you can see this looks pretty good, right? We've got 6 clusters now. The total population is 131,170. And our 6th cluster ended at 120. So fortunately, our calculations were pretty good. It didn't end over the total population, which would be bad. So that's looking pretty good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to transfer these numbers one by one to the list of settlements. So we're gonna copy the 11,000. And we're gonna look to see where that hits in the list. So where does that hit in the list? And you might have to do a paste special and not just a regular paste. Paste special, paste values. Come down some more. Yeah, paste values. Okay. There you go. So that's so that's perfect. And then we can label that cluster 1. Okay. Now let's go get the number for cluster 2 and do the same thing. Yeah, you have to paste special. Yeah, there you go. Okay, perfect.
Great. Did I do that correctly, Mac?
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic.
Thanks for walking us through it. And thanks, Ketty, for that question. I think it was really, really useful to walk back through this. After we've done that, I see that there are some questions coming up in the Q&A. And if folks have any questions about this, let's go back and look at these. So a couple of questions from Robert. And first question from Jose. This was a question before, so we'll maybe start with Jose's question and then go to Robert's two questions and any hands as well. I may stop sharing if that's okay, but let me know. I can always reshare as well. Or maybe I will keep it open actually, because maybe there might be questions about the Excel file. So Mac, the question from Jose is, when we choose the first number, if that number from the random number generator is very high, and then by the fourth cluster, we've already finished our total population, what do we do? Do we go back and restart, or do we set the random number generator so that it's within the first tranche of numbers? How do we walk through that?
Yeah, so the starting point random number will never be too high. And the reason is you're not choosing a starting point between 1 and the total population. You're choosing a starting point between 1 and the interval. And the interval is already divided by 6. So you will never get more than total population.
Thank you, Mac. That's really helpful. And thanks, Jose. That was a great question. And then Robert has two questions. Robert's first question is, how do you select the random starting point, which you just walked through, but maybe we can talk through that again and using that random number generator, where to find those. And then also what happens if the last cluster's population is more than the total population? So those two questions from Robert, and thanks also to Hamad also for your participation. And we'll go to Hamad's question next after Robert's two. Over.
Okay, so the first part of Robert's question was selecting, how do you select this starting point? So Robert, I believe, has already, I don't know, he's got a link somewhere, and maybe Robert can paste that into the chat. Maybe I don't know if it's the same Robert or not, but Robert has identified an app that you can download on your mobile phone on Android. iPhones have the same thing. So any random number app can be used, and you just put in there 1 and then what the range is, 1 to the interval, which, let's say in our instance, it's 21,862, and the phone will generate a number between 1 and 21,862 inclusive. So that's how you generate that.
Great, thanks, Mac. And this is Robert Opoku. And thanks, Robert, if you can paste the link for that random number generator app. The other question from Robert is, what happens if the population of the last cluster is more than the total population? Does that happen, and what does one do?
That does not happen.
That doesn't happen. Okay, all right. And if it does, maybe it's a sign folks to go back and review the instructions and go back through the steps.
Exactly. Yeah. If you divide the total population by 6, you will get an interval number in the random. If the random number is between 1 and that number, you will not exceed with the 6th cluster.
Okay, great. And thanks. The link mentioned is on one of the slides, and Robert has found it and copied it in the chat as well. And a question from Hamad. Is this what we would call systematic random sampling?
In some ways, yes, this is systematic random sampling. Usually systematic random sampling doesn't start with a random number, but it can. But in some ways, it's yes, it's systematic random sampling.
Great, thanks so much, Mac. And a question from Zainab as well. Can we just choose a random number from our head, or must we use a random generator app?
Yeah, should use some other. You should not use your head, but use a random number. There's also random number tables you can use. You can use currency notes, because the currency numbers are all randomly generated. But probably the straightforward is the app. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
There's
question.
also a command in Excel. We'll look that up, and at the end of the day, we'll paste that into the chat, or we'll bring it up tomorrow, and we'll make that available to everybody. It's probably something we should have done. I should have done.
Mark,
not we. I should have done.
sorry, Mark, I just typed it actually.
Okay.
If you look in the chat, it's the formula or the command is equal run between, and I've used 1 and 2 or 4 just as examples of numbers. So in this case, you would put 1 and that interval, which in our case is 21,862. Yeah. Thanks.
The issue with this command is that every time you make a change to the cell, that number will change. So you have to use the command and then copy its paste values to another cell for it to stick. Yeah.
Good point, Mark. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, in fact, just in pasting it, it changed to something else there. So
yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay, super fun. And yeah, thanks, Mac. We've gotten some nice comments as well. Thanking you for going back through step by step. And I also found it very helpful. So thank you so much. We have 30 minutes remaining in today. And yeah, wonderful to go through this participatory exercise. And the questions, please continue to ask questions as we move forward, and Zippo and I will be responding to the questions here, so we have a record of those. Mac has one more set of about 5 or 6 slides to go through, and then we have another participatory exercise, short exercise, which we may do together as a group, or we may offer it as a short homework. It's kind of a fun one on selecting households. So pay attention to the next slides because there will be a short exercise, and then Zippo will do a wrap up for the day. So thanks everyone for your very active participation. This is really a lot of fun and learning a lot. So Mac, back over to you. Thank you. And I'll go back to the slides in just a moment.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to do household selection now. Okay, first we're going to use list sampling and then equal segmentation. So we've already, actually, the first part of that we've already done. We've selected the villages. We just finished with that. We selected 6 villages out of a list of 250. that number could be 500 villages in the list or 600 segments, whatever. Select 6 of those. Then the next thing we want to do is we want to select, we want to use equal size segmentation and find a segment with approximately 20 households. Between, obviously getting exactly 20 is hard. So if you get anything between 15 and 25, that's good enough. In the final segment, we're going to select one starting simple random, using simple random sampling. We're going to actually draw a crude map of that last segment with about 20 households. We're going to number them 1 through 20, and we're going to choose one of those as the starting point. We're not going to choose all 10 from that map. We're just going to choose one of them as a starting point. Then we're going to use, you'll see there in the bar number 3, section number 3, we're going to select households 2 through 10 using a method called next nearest right door. And we'll go into that. This is what Polio does. We've adopted this exactly. Next, let's see. Okay, I can do my own slide movement. All right, so we have an example here. You'll see at the top, we're going to do 3 different rounds. That's what the different columns represent of segmentation. In our example, there was 1,440 total households in each village. We're going to draw a crude map of the village. We're going to divide the settlement into 4 equal segments, approximately equal, just crudely, very crudely. For example, from the school to the mosque, or the school to the market, we think there's, and now let me back up one. If you divide 1,440 into 4, then there's 360 in each of those 4 segments. So we're going to kind of divide the settlement into 4 equal segments where there's approximately 360. Now you don't have to get down to the household level. You don't have to, obviously, you don't have to count the households. Doesn't have to exactly be 360. You just estimate. You just estimate with a crude map. So the middle column, you'll see round 2. So let me back up to the column on the right. We've got 4 segments now, and we want to choose one of them to go forward. One of the 4 by using simple random sampling. We can use, again, the phone random number app to choose a number between 1 and 4 inclusive. And in this case, we chose the number 1. You'll see with the blue arrow on the left. In the middle, you'll see the image of round 2. So that whole image is 360 households, but we're going to divide those into 4. So when we divide 360 by 4, we get 90. And we do the same thing. We divide those into crudely, using a crude map, into 4. We select randomly a simple random sample between 1 and 4 inclusive. And in this instance, this example, we chose subsegment 4. Now, in subsegment 4, there's 90 households. Is that close to 20? No, it's not. So we need to divide it again into 4, those 90 into 4. And that's what the 3rd round of equal size segmentation is. Round 3, when we divide 90 into 4, we get 22 or 23 households. And again, we choose one, we choose a random number between 1 and 4. And in this example, we chose the number 4 again. So that's how we've reached the final segment. So the final segment, which is segment 4, has 22 or 23 households. Now we actually then draw a map that shows each house, and then we number those houses from 1 to the total number. Let's say that actually when you map, there was not 22 or 23, but there was only 19, or there was 26 or 25 or something like that, which you find out when you actually map every single household in that subsegment, which should be around 15 to 25. Now, if it's 26, no problem. If it's 30, no problem. If it's 12, no problem. Because all we're going to do is we're going to select one household from that crude map with a number, with numbered households on it. We're not going to select all 10. So if your final segment, if one of your segments in round 2 or round 3 was 25 to 45, you can divide by 2 or 3 instead of 4 to get approximately 15 to 25 households in the final segment. So this is what we do in the final segment. This is an example from the Polio manual. In this final segment, they had exactly 20. You don't need to have exactly 20, but they, for their illustration, they used 20. And they used a random number generator on the phone, because all surveyors will have a phone. At least one person in the team will have a phone to input the data, and also to use this random number generator. So in the random number generator app, it came up with 13. They put in 1 to 20, and a random number 13 came up. So this is how you choose the starting household. So the next slide shows how you select the other households. So what the next nearest right door method is that from the starting household, you come out of the house, you start going to the right, and you choose the next nearest household. And if it's a rural area, you skip that household. And then you go to the right, come out the door, stand in front of the door, you go to the right, and you find another household. And then that's household number 2. So for rural areas, you choose every second household. And because you're always turning to the right, you actually form kind of concentric circles around the starting household. If it's in the urban area, following the Polio method, you select every third household, not every other, until you get 10. Now, if everybody was home and you interviewed 10 households, then you're finished with that cluster. For LQAS, you need at least or exactly 10 households with interview data. If one of those households was not at home, or if they refused to be interviewed, then you need to add one more house. If 10 of those households that you visited, there were 2 that were not at home or refused interval, then you need to add 2 more households. So you may need to add a household 11 or 12 if you're missing the data. Now you need to make sure that if you come to a household that's not at home or they refuse the interview, you still put a record into the phone showing that you were there, they weren't, and then you record whether the reason why you did not get data. And there's two possibilities. One is that they weren't at home. The second is they were at home, but they refused the interview. And the reason you collect data on those households with missing data is that similar to a DHS or an MIS, you can adjust the data for missing households. The weights, the probability weights get calculated. And it has something to do with the households with missing data as well. It's a complicated subject, but we've created a program that helps the data analysts to do. Usually this is not done until you get to the national level analysis and do analysis by either by state or province, by region. But that's what we recommend in this method. Okay.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mac, for walking us through that. And we have really caught up with time. So we'll take between 5 to 8 minutes for this exercise. And sorry, my dog Bella would also like to get involved in the exercise. This is a simpler one. You will need, if you can grab a piece of paper and a pen, will be helpful, or you can also write out some numbers, type them into your laptop or computer. So we're going to walk through what Mac just showed us. And I promise you, I did this exercise and then I had 4 or 5 questions for Mac on this. So again, this is really just to get us kind of using the material, getting comfortable with the material. So I'm going to share this brief scenario with you and then give everyone a minute or two to draw out how you would go through the steps that Mac just showed for this segmentation and selection of the first household, as well as the remaining households 2 through 10. So the scenario is simple. You have in one of your clusters, in one of the villages, selected through a probability proportionate to size, that there are approximately 1,000 households. So take a minute and think through how you would use equal size segmentation to get to the final segment of 15 to 25 households. And then how you would choose the first household and then households 2 through 10. Does everyone understand any questions about the exercise before we give you a minute to work on it? Please put those in the Q&A or the chat. And then Miko has a question about right-hand household selection. If there's a risk that you've arrived at a household already questioned. So maybe we can answer that as folks are getting their materials ready. And what do you do if you do arrive at a household that, if you kind of keep going in a circle, do you can come back and loop back to the same point at the circle? Over.
Yeah, I can respond to Miko's question. So you skip those households that you've already visited or were on your list on the first circle. So yes, it could be that one of those households you visited was on the most right household, but do not include them. Do not double count them.
Don't go
Just,
back twice, yeah.
Yeah, don't go back twice.
Don't
Do
add someone else in the household, yeah.
a larger concentric circle that, yeah.
Fan out as you go. Yeah, great
Yeah.
question, Miko.
It could be it's the door is more straight ahead than it is to the right to make sure that the concentric circle does not loop back on the inner circle where you use them to in an earlier household.
Great, thanks so much, Mac. And back to our exercise. For the first step, if everyone can think about doing these steps, if you have 1,000 households in your village. So we'll give everyone a minute and would like to ask for a volunteer to share and present how you arrived at this and the number of households that you arrived at for your final segmentation. We'll give everyone a moment to do that. Great. Hopefully everyone was able to do that with the 1,000 households and would like to ask for a volunteer to step forward and walk us through how you did the segmentation. Any volunteers? If not, we'll select a participant who can help us walk through. And no answers, all answers are good. We're all figuring this out together with Mac's help. We have a volunteer. Please go ahead. I can see the hand, but I can't see whose hand it is. Hilaire. Merci, Hilaire. Vous avez la parole,
Okay.
Hilaire.
Je vais essayer.
Merci,
Vous
Hilaire.
m'entendez?
Allez-y.
Yeah, okay. Donc j'ai suivi le même processus. J'ai pris les 1000 ménages et divisé par 4. Donc ça me donne 250 ménages par segment.
Je vais juste traduire étape par étape.
Yeah,
So Hilaire took the 1,000 households, he divided by 4, and he got 4 equal segments of 250. Merci, Hilaire.
Alors, on est toujours loin des 15 à 20 ménages. Donc, j'ai pris encore les 250, j'ai divisé par 4. Donc, ça nous donne...
Hilaire, on vous a perdu. Vous êtes là? I think we lost Hilaire. Can someone else step in? Once you have the 250 households, what's the next step? If no volunteers, maybe Ketty, could you step in?
Thanks, Mary. I'm struggling.
We all are. Yeah, Mac had to walk me through it. So if you go from 1,000 households, you divide by 4. 50?
I
by
know.
4, then it comes to 250.
Yep,
Okay.
and then from 250, when you divide by 4, it's not quite even, so,
Yes.
so
Mhm.
what,
So
yeah.
it comes to 60, about 62, 63, if we were at
Perfect.
62.
We have other
Exactly.
volunteers.
Hello.
Sorry? Okay, go, keep going, Ketty, that's perfect. And then from 62 or 63, I think, you know, in practicality, you choose one, and then what do you get for the last one?
So if I divide it by 22, the 22 households,
Which 22? So you had 62 and 63. So then you need to divide by 4 again.
oh yes, by 4, sorry.
Okay, we're
It gives me
together.
about 15.6 households.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So 15 or 16, 15 or
Yes.
16 households. Exactly. Exactly. Excellent. Thanks, Ketty, for stepping in, and merci beaucoup, Hilaire, aussi pour le volontariat. That's great. So that's the first step of the exercise. The next step of the exercise is, how do you select the first household? So let's say at the end you come up, so here, instead of this last segment being 22 or 23 households, you have 16 households now. So who would like to share what kind of process they would use to find the first household? Someone who hasn't participated yet. How about Terry Muchoki? Do you remember what kind of app we use, or what we use to find the first household? And maybe Terry had to step away. Geronimo. Zandamela. Can you share with us how you would find the first household? Do you remember we use a kind of an app or something to find the first household out of 16? And we can go.
There's a question in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Can't do. Can you just say what the question is, Robert?
So Ahmad is asking for step 3. Instead of dividing into 4, can you divide into 3 to get 20 or more households in the sample of the 100 households?
Great question. Mac, can we divide by 3 to get something closer to 20?
Yes.
Great question, Hamad. And yeah, still waiting for a volunteer. Who would like to tell us? It's the answer is on this slide. For how do we randomly choose the first household? Just shout it out.
So Mary, using an app, you would select a random number between 1 and 16 if you divide it by 4, or 1 and whatever if you divide it by 3. So that would be your first house. And then after you have interviewed that house, you would use that nearest right-hand method, so afterwards you get out of the house, you turn to your right, you don't go to the first household. If it's a rural area, you go to the second household, and you keep turning right like that, skipping every next household. And in an urban area, you would select every third household, always going to the right again.
Yes.
Over.
Excellent. Excellent. Great. Thank you so much, Miko. Yeah, so you can use that random number generator app, or you can use, thanks to Fikadu for sharing this thing that we can use in Excel, the equals rand between, and give the range. You can use a currency note. There are things you can find online that are random number generator tables and things. So finding that number randomly And one thing I learned today from Mac is that then you don't limit yourself only to those
I don't know
16
anything.
or 20 households. You can keep going in the catchment area beyond. So finding the 16 households in this case is to find the first household randomly. Then when you do the every other door or the every third door, it's in the larger area. You don't have to limit yourself only to those. And with that, I think.
There's one more point,
Yep,
and that is,
ahead.
there's a small step, a half step before you do the random number generator. And that is you have to make in the field, you have to make a small map that shows each household and number them. Yes, that one. Once you get the numbered households, then you can apply the app to choose the 13, the number 13.
Excellent point. Yeah, thank you, Mac, because yeah, the houses don't come pre-numbered. Yeah, so you draw a little map and then you number them. And you may work with local authorities to kind of map out the area, et cetera, community leaders. Great. So excellent work today, everyone. This is really wonderful. We do have one last exercise, so I want to turn it back over to Zippo. We may go over by just a couple of minutes, if that's okay, just for the wrap up for today. Zippo, sorry that I ran over, and back to you.
Great. If you stop sharing, I can share my screen. I figured I could show the Menti from there as well. And
Perfect.
I can see Hilaire has his hand up, so maybe as I set up.
Yeah.
Monsieur,
J'ai une question.
Oui.
Pour désigner le premier ménage pour démarrer la collecte des données, j'ai eu la chance de participer à l'enquête de couverture de la vaccination. Lorsqu'on subdivise, on numérote les cases. Je crois qu'il y avait la technique du crayon qu'on utilisait. Donc, on jetait le crayon en l'air et lorsque le crayon tombe, la pointe dirigée par le crayon, on commençait par ça pour le premier ménage et maintenant de proche en proche. Est-ce que cette technique est valable?
Merci, c'est élégant. Bon, on va poser la question à Mac. So Mac, Hilaire is saying in his experience, they've also done something where they throw a pencil up in the air and then the point of the pencil goes, something like that. Is that also valid?
That's a biased technique.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, that is what was used in the 1970s.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's a biased technique that we don't want to use. That's why we go to the trouble of finding a final segment, because it's biased. So usually the pencil is thrown up by the chief, the settlement chief or the village chief's house. And those houses are often, sometimes bigger, have more income.
Yeah.
And they're more likely to be selected than marginal populations at the end of the village or far away or whatever. So it's heavily biased, which is why Polio in 2012 said we need to find a different method. And that's why they came up with this method.
Okay, that's really good to know, Mac. Donc, Hilaire, ce que Mac a décrit, c'est que c'est une approche qui a été utilisée par le passé, mais que parfois ça introduit un bias. Ça peut être biaisé parce que peut-être ça se fait devant le ménage du chef de village ou les notables du village qui sont peut-être les familles qui sont plus aisés, qui ont un peu plus de moyens. Donc, c'est pour cela que il est suggéré d'utiliser la génération aléatoire du ménage chiffré, du ménage numéroté. Ouais. And I see a question from Lidwin. So we'll loop back to that, but I want to let Zippo explain this exercise so that people can be doing the exercise, and then we'll wrap up with Lidwin's great question here. Zippo, over to you.
Great, thank you, Mary. So like we did in the first exercise with Menti, if you could scan, I can see there's 9 people already. You could scan the little, I don't know what it's called, the scanning thing, or you
QR
could
code.
Yes, the QR code, thank you. Or you could go to menti.com and enter the code 84130557. It will take you into this wrap-up questionnaire, which is essentially asking what worked well and helped you understand the material for assessing ITN campaigns. And I can see there's some answers coming in already. There's about 4 of them, and you can enter as many responses as you want.
Thanks,
Thank
Zippo. And a quick question. Is there also a question to ask the group what we can improve on for tomorrow so we know what to do better?
It's the next question. So I'm just giving
Ooh,
a
you think
chance.
of everything. You think of everything, Zippo. So we'll give people a moment maybe to fill this one out while we share Lidwin's question. Then we'll go to
Sure.
the next question. And I'm sorry for anyone who has to go. We're 4 minutes over. So time management, although I think we've done well since we used to be 20 minutes over. And I would say back to the group that group participation for me has been something that's really helped me today in understanding the material. So thanks to everyone. Last question from Lidwin, who's asked some very good questions today. Why not choose a number equal of an equal number of households in each sub-segment? Because that might fall on the same family. I'm not sure I totally... Lidwin, est-ce que vous pouvez reposer la question verbalement? Je ne sais pas si j'ai tout à fait saisi la question. If Lidwin is still on, it might be good to have her share the question. I don't know if she's still on. Lidwin, est-ce que vous êtes là?
Oui, je suis là.
Merci. Est-ce que vous pouvez reprendre la question? Je ne sais pas si j'ai bien saisi le point.
Oui, donc quand on est à la 3e phase, le round 3,
Oui.
on remarque qu'on choisit encore un sous-segment. Et il y a, je crois qu'il pourrait y avoir un risque de choisir, quand on tourne dans un petit secteur, on court un risque de tomber sur la même famille. Donc, pourquoi ne pas choisir un nombre égal de ménages dans les 4 sous-segments quand on est à la phase 3, au round 3?
Oui, oui, et je pense, je vais remettre ça au Mac. Il avait expliqué suite à la question de Miko aussi, que oui, quand vous tournez, vous pouvez, comme c'est un cercle, bien sûr, vous pouvez revenir, mais peut-être que ça doit être un rayon plus ovale où vous prenez le prochain ménage, mais peut-être c'est pas exactement à droite, peut-être c'est un peu devant. Pour ne pas retomber sur le même ménage. Mais sinon, vous posez la question. Et aussi, pour les 16 ou 20 ménages, c'est juste pour choisir le premier. Et après ça, c'est tout le catchment area. C'est tout le village, quoi. C'est pas uniquement là où il y a les 15 ou 16 ménages. Est-ce que ça a aidé? So Mac, the question from Lidwin is, again, similar to Miko's question, you know, when you turn in the circle, you can fall on the same household. So I explained what you had said to Miko, that maybe you go in a more oval shape or you go a little bit forward. But I think what Lidwin is asking is, can you choose a catchment area with the number of households that's more equal to what you need, I think. Not exactly sure about the second part of the question. But again, just how to make sure that you don't fall on the same household.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't have anything to add to what you said. It's kind of similar to the response before. The second part of your question, I don't fully understand about choosing an area with exactly the right number of households.
Mhm. Yep. Donc, Lidwin, ce que Mac a décrit, c'est que juste, peut-être c'est pas exactement à droite, peut-être vous allez un peu devant. On ne comprend pas totalement la deuxième partie de votre question, si vous voulez reprendre, ou sinon nous pouvons aussi reprendre la question demain, si vous voulez.
On pourrait la reprendre demain parce que on est à la phase pratique sur le terrain. Donc, on pourrait la reprendre demain.
OK, parfait. Parfait. Et vous pouvez aussi me partager par email et on peut échanger pour être sûr qu'on démarre avec ça demain.
Oui, oui.
Okay, merci beaucoup, Lidwin. So Lidwin will send us, she'll send me an email and we'll come loop back to that question tomorrow, Mac.
Okay, perfect.
Great, Zippo, over to you and for wrapping up the day. And thanks for everyone who's staying on a few extra minutes. And if Anita is there, we'll start our call after this. Over. Thanks.
Great, Mary. Thank you so much. So I've moved on to the next question and we have about 3 answers so far. I don't know, Mary, do you want me to show the answers?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
See the things we need to think about for tomorrow. And thanks everyone for the feedback.
Okay.
Okay.
So translation is a bit erratic, and then need to practice more the Excel file, get used to terminologies, and then I'll try this one. Avoir un peu plus de temps pour plus exercer les pratiques apprises.
Very good, Zippo. That's great.
And then there's let's go through the household selection process again. So
Okay.
I think the French one was have a bit more time for the practical exercises.
Yep. Excellent. Excellent. And great problems to have, everyone, because it means we've all been actively participating and asking lots of questions. So thank you all for that. And yes, we'll continue to try to manage time. Also, Eliza will be sending the slides from today. So please do take some time to review them. And review the exercises. We'll do as much as we possibly can in the 3 hours tomorrow, knowing that we also have some new material to cover. So we'll do as much as we can, and then we'll assess, how to come back and continue working with this and learning from Mac's great facilitation. So thank you, everyone. Robert, do you have a last closing that you'd like to close us out with?
Just to say a very big thank you to you, Mary, Mark, and also Zippo for facilitating the sessions. It's been a very wonderful session. Tomorrow we start at the same time. Please kindly join a bit early. Today we started, I think, 5 minutes late, and that's also one of the reasons we couldn't keep up to the time. So see you all next week. Tomorrow, sorry. Thank you.
See you all tomorrow, and yeah, let's try and join 5 minutes early tomorrow, and we'll dive in as soon as we get a quorum and right on the dot. Thanks so much to you, Robert, and thanks everyone. Bonne continuation. And Anita, if you're there, I'll call you in 2 minutes.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Merci beaucoup. Bonne continuation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.